The impact of 1977's Star Wars was huge. It was weird, it was new, it was unlike anything the world had ever seen, and everything wanted to be the next Star Wars. Within the next couple years, we'd see countless science fiction movies and shows trying to capture that same success. But don't take my word for it, I wouldn't be alive for another 2 decades. I wasn't there, I could be making all this up for all you know. Yeah, I wasn't around to see the release of Star Wars or its immediate impact. The Black Hole came out 2 years later, but who am I to say that this was heavily influenced by R2-D2? I wasn't around, I can only speculate. I didn't grow up with that one, I grew up with this one. So don't listen to me bring up how suspiciously Star Wars-like Battlestar Galactica 1978 is. Listen to George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, who tried suing them for being suspiciously Star Wars-like. At least, very early on. The further the series drifts from Star Wars over time, the further it ascends into madness. Whenever I talk about something, I want to be able to give historical context for it. I really want to convey what it felt like to be there in that moment. But being negative 20 years old at the time, I can't quite remember. So let's jump ahead to 2012. We just got this wacky new thing on the Wii called Netflix that lets you watch any movie or show that's on there whenever you want. Anyway, they added the 1978 Battlestar Galactica, and my dad was like, hey, this was cool when I was a kid, let's watch this. And 20 minutes in, I was like, this is old and boring, I'm gonna watch Invader Zim. But 12 years later, I gave it another shot, watched it all the way through, and I can't stop thinking about it. I need to talk about this series. Now, being a science fiction show from the 70s, you might not necessarily expect it to hold up 50 years later, and well, I enjoyed it, though to be honest, it took me a couple episodes to really start to appreciate it. But once I was in it, I was in it. So the 12 colonies of humanity have been at war with the Cylons, who I can never remember the names of. I keep wanting to call them Blorgons.
Inspector, look out! Blorgons!
So the Cylons are these evil robot guys, and then they destroy everything. All the 12 colonies are in ruin. And all of the survivors are on the Battlestar Galactica, heading towards the mysterious 13th colony, who might be able to help them win the war. A place called Earth. They're gonna be disappointed when they find us. So it's your new Planet of the Week adventure series following Apollo, the typical leading heroic man, and Starbuck, the silly one. The style and tone of each episode kind of varies depending on who our lead is. Apollo is usually the center of the epic, dramatic two-parters. These are the bigger episodes that tend to progress the overarching story forward. And then Starbuck takes the lead in the weird one-off episodes. Uh-oh, Starbuck was tricked into becoming the sheriff of a town who sacrifices their sheriff every single day to be killed by the Bores? Whoa, Starbuck's been framed for murdering this space hockey player. How will he get out of this one? Starbuck meets his long-lost dad, but maybe not. But maybe not. But yes. Or no? They do this back and forth throughout the series with the two taking turns as the lead. And I actually really like this structure, it keeps the series constantly engaging. All the side characters are pretty good too. Boomer's the other friend whenever they need a third guy for adventures. Chiba comes in halfway through the series and kinda serves the same purpose. This guy's name was apparently Green Bean. Okay, they're just naming guys whatever. I really enjoyed the whole cast, with the exception of like 12 of them. The Council of 12 are so stupid. Every episode they're in, they just decide, we should really be doing the opposite of whatever the commander thinks is a good idea, regardless of whether or not it makes sense, just because, well, because. I don't know, I think they just like being stinkers. I mean, I guess to be fair, this is just what real politicians act like. Commander Adama just has to go with it and let things play out. And then by the end, after everything goes wrong, he's just like, whoa, that's crazy, guys. Who could have seen this coming?
Whatever you wish, Adama.
Whatever you wish, Adama.
Actually, this is the third episode type. Adama loses control of the situation due to the council or some new character they meet, and then comes in at the end to fix everything. Also, he can just move objects with his mind. I'm pretty sure this comes up once and then never again. And then there's Boxy. This is kind of an odd character. So he and his mom Serena were survivors from this planet who go with them on the Galactica. She gets married to Apollo in like the second episode, and then she starts training as a pilot, and it's like, okay, this is a neat dynamic. These two have to go on missions together now. There's gonna be some conflict there. And then she just dies in the following episode, so just kidding. So now Apollo is Boxy's dad, and the two of them never mention her again until the last episode. To be fair, they do the same to Zach, Apollo's brother who dies 10 minutes into the first episode. I'm pretty sure he's never brought up again for the entire series. Boxy shows up in like every episode early on, and then like halfway through they kinda drop him and he only gets a small appearance here and there. But what makes this character especially unique is that he comes packaged with another character. The reason I didn't like Battlestar when I first watched it is because they kill this little doggy guy like 20 minutes in. Typically, if a dog or a cat dies, so does any interest I have in the series. When I first tried watching this back in 2012, this is where I stopped. Oh, but don't worry, because they replace him with a robot dog. Oh, sorry, a Daggett. Because they don't have dogs in space, you gotta make up a name for a space dog. Like, you can't have minutes or days or hours. They gotta have centons and microns and sectons, and sometimes I think they're just using these interchangeably. Like, they keep saying words at me and I don't know what any of them mean. Sorry, so Muffet the dog dies, they replace him with Muffet 2, and I don't like it.
That's not Muffet. It's not even a real Daggett.
That's what I'm saying. I hate this thing, but it's not really in the show that much. I can only remember like one episode where he's actually relevant to the plot. He goes into these vents to rescue everyone from a fire because they promise him a Scooby snack or something. Halfway through the series, I just started thinking, wait, did they shove a kid in this costume? The answer is no. They shoved a chimpanzee in this costume.
Evie was like a 2-year-old child.
Let's go. Evie, get up.
And we lost more time on the set because of that doggone monkey.
He had to go through some ducting, room to room.
Come here. Here, hold it, sit.
Everyone runs by at full tilt, and this thing is just kind of strolling across the bridge. And they set off these charges behind it. He zips across the bridge full tilt.
I kept thinking she was just slipping, and she was actually trying to get to Boone, and I wouldn't let her down, and she took a chomp out of me. And that hurt, I gotta tell you. You heard me scream down the next county. It scared me to death.
Come here, get under there. Right here. Good. Hit.
You could just do anything in the 70s. Shove a funny monkey in a robot suit? Sure. To be fair, even during my childhood, they were throwing them on ice and making them play hockey, which admittedly is also probably pretty bad. History has not been kind to funny monkeys. But we gotta talk about the best character this series has to offer. Lord Baltar. He was one of those stupid council guys until he says, nah, I'm gonna help the robots kill all humans. And then the Blorgons just put him in charge because he thinks like a human, so he should be able to track them down. Unless you're watching the Battlestar Galactica movie. This was in theaters just a few months before the series began, and it's just the pilot episode with a few changes. The biggest of which being Baltar. Instead of putting him in command of a base star, they just kill him. But in the 4 months between the movie and the pilot, I guess they changed their minds, so his execution isn't canon. For the first half of the series, he's chasing the Galactica. And by that I mean sitting in this comically large empty room, episode after episode, spinning in his swivel chair, living my dream. Sometimes he has a chat with his sassy robot friend Lucifer, and that's kinda like all he does. But everything changes in the two-parter War of the Gods, in which Space Satan, yes, like the literal devil, but in space, uses his evil mind powers to trick Baltar into surrendering. So now he's just in jail for like a long stretch of the show. And just when you start to think, man, how long is this guy gonna be in here? When's he gonna do something? You get the episode Baltar's Escape. I have this one on VHS for some reason. He plans this big jailbreak with all the other bad guys, and they actually all get away, except for Baltar. In his own escape episode, he ends up getting captured again. This character is so funny. He spends the first half of the series in a big empty room and the second half of the series in a jail cell. He's forced to help out during the finale, because if they fail, the ship blows up and he's dead too. But they promise to free him and drop him off on a random planet. And the series ends without us ever getting to see that. Like, come on, I want to see him get dropped off his space Chuck E. Cheese. The one thing I absolutely despise about this show, it's one unforgivable sin. They start each episode with a recap of the episode that you're about to watch. I'm about to watch the episode, why are you showing me the highlights of it? And I get it, this is just what TV was like back in the 70s, but in the year 2024, I'm gonna be irrationally angry about it. Anyway, I guess Fox and George Lucas weren't too happy about some of the similarities between Star Wars and Battlestar, and I always assumed this lawsuit was the reason the original series was so short-lived, but this case didn't get very far. Sure, some of this is similar, but it was never plagiarism. After 24 episodes, Battlestar Galactica was cancelled due to declining ratings and the show just being too expensive to make, which is a real shame. I felt like the show was getting constantly better and more interesting as it went on, and I would have loved to have seen more from it. There was a lot of potential for stories. Even if it's not a complete ending, I do really like the final moments of the series.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. Big shadow. We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
There was a lot of stuff planned for a second season, though some of this info is hard to find a source on, but some of these ideas were partially realized in the sequel series, Battlestar 1980. Editor's note, that's not what the show's called. I will continue to get it wrong for the remainder of this video. Battlestar fans talk about this series the same way Star Wars fans talk about the holiday special. A lot of people don't like this one. And you know what? I don't agree with a lot of people. I think this show is really funny. Right off the bat though, you can see this is going to be a completely different show. Most of the original characters are gone aside from Adama and Boomer, who got a promotion. Good for him. This takes place 30 years after the original series, and our leading man Apollo just died off screen at some point. And in classic Battlestar fashion, he's never mentioned again for the rest of the series. Meanwhile, during the time skip, our beloved character Starbuck got shot down in space, crash-landed on a deserted planet while the Battlestar was forced to abandon him.
Boomer, don't you think I want to go back for him? You think I want to leave someone I love like a son?
So were these guys, but you don't seem too upset about those. Being stuck on a planet all alone, he just gets bored and builds a Cylon, who tries to murder him, obviously. But throughout the course of the episode, the two become really good friends, and it's oddly kinda sweet. They argue constantly because one's a very silly man and the other one's a murder robot, but I was invested in their friendship. Anyway, Sai the Cylon goes on a walk to find Starbuck a girlfriend, and she's like one of the space angels from the original series, I think. It's not really super clear. Anyway, she and Starbuck have like a spirit child, I guess, but then the Cylons show up to kill everybody. Thankfully, they've been building a working spaceship to get out of there, and Starbuck's space angel girlfriend uses it and leaves. And then it looks like Sai is gonna join his Cylon buddies, but decides to give up his life protecting his friend. So once again, Starbuck is completely alone and stranded and is stuck here until I guess he eventually dies. There were plans to bring him back later. He would have been rescued by the Space Angels, but the series was canceled before that, so it's not canon. This is his permanent fate. But his weird spirit child ended up aboard the Galactica, Dr. Z, who's super smart and knows everything. So like, Adama, who looks the same after 30 years, is technically the guy in charge, but really it's this kid calling the shots and just telling him what to do. Adama's not all that great in this. He kind of lost everything that made him cool in the original. The only other returning character is Boxy, who's all grown up and goes by Troy now. And he's replaced Muffet too with this guy named Dylan. They just gave up on space names, I guess. So to recap, after decades, the Galactica has finally reached Earth as we enter our final story arc. Here's what's become of our beloved cast of characters. Died off screen. Presumably died off screen. Likely died of starvation while stranded. Old and not cool anymore. Technically a pre-existing character. Promoted and cooler than ever. Boomer fans stay winning. Awesome. Episode 1 of Battlestar 1980. They arrive on Earth. And it only just now occurs to them that, hey, what if we've been leading the Cylons to the last of the humans on accident for the last 30 years, and now they're gonna show up and finally wipe them out? They also run into humans in like every episode of the original series on various planets. Surely you could have just gotten like all of them together to expand their forces, but I guess those guys weren't good enough. Anyway, after 30 years, we're here on Earth, and what do you know, it's 1980 and Earth is so technologically behind that they would be absolutely useless against the Cylons and be wiped out immediately. So Troy and Dylan spend the entire series hanging out on Earth trying to prepare them for the inevitable invasion. Almost the entire show takes place on Earth instead of exploring planets, because it's less expensive, and a lot sillier than the original. They don't know Earth stuff, and so much of it is them accidentally causing mayhem. These two are wanted for like 34 separate crimes that they commit throughout the course of the show, and there's only like 10 episodes. Like, Dylan accidentally robs a bank in one episode. This is awesome.
You did what? It's called robbing a bank. I couldn't help it just happened.
Instead of a Monster of the Week space adventure show, this is like a goofy sitcom that sometimes has flying motorcycles. Less Star Wars, more, Alf, maybe? They become friends with a reporter named Jamie. They need her knowledge of Earth stuff, and she always helps out because she wants to report on all of their weird alien hijinks, but she never really gets to and just ends up with their messes. Like at one point, they bring a dozen kids from the Galactica to Earth, and they just leave them for her to take care of. Does she have the space and money to raise a dozen space children? Don't worry about it. There's an episode where the kids join a baseball team and they have to pretend to be bad because on Earth they have heightened abilities and can jump like 20 feet in the air. This show's so funny. This episode is the Battlestar Galactica equivalent of that episode of Dragon Ball Z where Piccolo has to get his driver's license. There is a villain. I couldn't tell you his name. He's another one of those stupid council guys. He had a different plan to prepare the people of Earth. He wants to go back in time and give space weapons to the Nazis during World War II, so that in the present day, Earth will be technologically advanced enough to fight the Cylons. And also the Nazis would have won World War II. He really wants that to be part of his plan for some reason. Personally, I feel like time travel would have come in handy before this point, but you know what? I'm not even gonna question it. More importantly, I don't like the villain of this series. He doesn't have that same bad boy energy that Baltar had. He might have been incompetent, but everything about him was so memorable and funny, and this guy just doesn't have it. We need a real villain. We need the Cylons back. And thankfully, there's a two-parter where a human-looking Cylon and a more traditional one land on Earth. These might be the best episodes. They truly have everything. There's a big dance sequence. Scooby-Doo and Hong Kong Phooey are in it. There's this nice scene where Troy goes back to save this doggy from a fire. That was a nice moment. It's the one time in the show where I really thought about him being Boxy from the original series. I don't know if that was an intentional callback, but I like it. And we have the best scene in the entire series, where one of the Cylons gets killed by a microwave.
The machine. Turn off that machine!
So, that's probably the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. There were some weird mandates that forced Battlestar 1980 to be a little what it is. Obviously, smaller budget, you can't really do the grand space adventures, and even just being stuck on Earth, it had really high production costs. There were also weird mandates because of the time slot that it aired in. They were limited on the amount of violence that they could include, and it had to be educational for the kids. Which is why there's so much of the characters explaining Earth concepts, why a dozen children are sent to Earth halfway through. This got cancelled after 10 episodes, and there was never a real conclusion to this story. Both of these shows are drastically different, but I enjoyed both a lot. The original is a pretty cool space adventure show that only gets better as it goes on. 1980 is non-stop hijinks and mayhem that probably makes the original show worse by existing, but is a ton of fun as its own thing. And there's been a bunch of Battlestar Galactica stuff after 1980. There was that 2004 complete reboot series. There's been comics, toys, video games. The Cylons are in that Funko Pops video game.
And Cylons from Battlestar Galactica. They're certainly not toying around.
I'm glad I revisited this series and gave it another shot. I've never really seen any of the other stuff from the reboots or anything. Maybe I will someday, but I truly do not believe that there is any topping the microwave scene.